Shawanda.
Thank you, Shawanda.
You're welcome.
All right. And for the person who's on the phone, 443-610-0451, can you let us know who you are?
Okay, I think they dropped off.
Probably because I just read out their phone number to the live stream, which is not a good thing to do. I realize in retrospect. I apologize, whoever that person was. So welcome back all. And so let me go through just what our agenda is for today. I'm just going to recap what we talked about 2 weeks ago. Some of you may not have been here, or some of you may have forgotten. So just recap where we are. And then we're going to talk about Pillar 2 outcome measures. For those of you who weren't here two weeks ago, we didn't get through and start talking about Pillar 2 outcome measures. So luckily you get to be here now for this conversation. And then we're going to jump into the Pillar 3 measures and talk about outputs and then outcomes. And at the end, Emma and Joe and Rachel will wrap up. I have to leave 15 minutes early. So I will see you all 2 weeks from there. We'll not be able to say goodbye to you, but so if we can just do a little recap kind of where our minds are, where they should be. Next slide. So just a reminder of the difference between, go back one, outputs and outcomes. So outputs, and we're ranking the importance of the various types of measures based on these two categories. Outputs, those don't confirm that a change has taken place, but they serve as key indicators that a change may be taking place, usually conveyed through numbers, just quick outputs of whatever the change that we had hoped, the action change that we had intended to happen. And then outcomes are a little bit later. They convey the program's impact on participants as demonstrated through a change in their behavior, knowledge, and/or beliefs. All right, next slide. And as part of this ranking, we had asked for the members of the group to select up to 5 output measures and 5 outcome measures that the AIB will set targets for and publicly monitor progress towards reaching these targets. And we're not saying that there's going to be 5 of each in the end. We're just using that as a tool to learn from you which ones are the most salient for you. And so then we consider which of these measures are necessary to publicly track in order to effectively tell the story of Blueprint's implementation. And just a note that all of the measures that we talk about are important, and to the best extent possible, AIB is going to be internally kind of tracking those data to see if some of these things are moving when and they're actually showing the change that we're expecting to see, even though we're not setting targets on it. But so we're trying kind of doing a dual process here where we'll be setting targets and watching officially some measures, but other ones will be informally monitoring. Next up. And so just one last reminder is that we're consensus driven. We're trying to have a conversation but we want to hear people who disagree so we can hear about all the challenges that these various measures will have. We will provide to the board these concerns, the affordances of some measures, but the problems with those measures as well. We are open to updating measures over time as needed. And we also need to recognize that some measures may have very slow progress, and that should be part of our conversation. One other thing that should be on here too is some of these things are not measurable at the time. We don't have the data right now to measure them, or we don't have the mechanisms to measure them. So, but we can talk about that and what it would take to get such a mechanism in place. All right, so before we jump into sort of a recap from last week, does anyone have questions on process or procedure, or excited about June and summer? Okay, we're okay. Feel free to chime in. But so just to recap from last time we met, for the Pillar 1 output measures, remember this is the those outputs that we're expecting from the change in the behaviors or the change in the initiatives or what's happening at the programming level. So these were the most salient items that came up that when people ranked and we had a discussion about them. The one that's highlighted in yellow was the most salient. So the percent, and this is kind of combined of two that we had talked about, were percentage of 3-year-olds from low-income houses and 4-year-olds who are enrolled in full-day pre-K disaggregated. The disaggregated there was about student demographics or by provider. Emma, I can't remember which provider type or
Provider.
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But all measures, as our little footnote and head note, I don't think head note is a word, but have said all along, all measures will where they can be disaggregated by student demographic groups. And then the other 4, number of public and private pre-K providers, number of families served by Patty and Judy centers, number of teachers participating in professional development to support KRA administration, and the percentage of pre-K providers participating in available financial incentives and support programs. And again, this is just a summary of what we talked about 2 weeks ago. If people have comments that they want to share, the AIB website, and then I'm talking to the live stream right now, the AIB website has a place to share feedback. And if you want to share feedback on these, please do so. Emma, you looked like you were going to say something. Did I interpret that right?
Yeah, no, you that was great. For the first one, I may have misspoken. When you said providers, it's disaggregated by type of provider, but also student data as well. So I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So that was where we landed on the pillar 1 output measures. Next slide for the pillar 1 outcome measures. So those further down the road where we're hoping to see change. The 2 most salient of the salient that came out were percentage of students served by public and private pre-K providers who demonstrate kindergarten readiness. And I think we need to talk about how we're defining kindergarten readiness, but not in this forum right now. Percentage of public and private pre-K teachers and teaching assistants meeting the high quality standards. And then the other 3 items that were seen as important were the percentage of providers who have achieved the 3, 4, or 5 Excels rating, percentage of students served by Patty and Judy centers who demonstrate kindergarten readiness. Right? So that's sort of a subset of the bullets above, the yellow ones. And then the percentage of students served by Maryland Infants and Toddlers program who demonstrate readiness. So 3 of these have to do with demonstrating readiness. So again, if you can share comments with us outside this meeting or on the AIB website. All right, so next up we come to pillar 2. And in pillar 2, which I think is the logic model after this slide, Emma, that we're going to remind. Okay, it's after this slide. So, there's the logic model. Did you want to say anything about this crazy model? It's a beautiful model.
Yeah, about the pillar 2 model. I know that Jackie talked about it last time, okay. But we can certainly answer any lingering questions about it. But looking at, again, the expected outcomes that are here for pillar 2 have a lot to do with teacher diversity, teacher quality, the supply of teachers, meaning that, and trying to trace that back to these kind of 3 big areas of how these are going to continuously interact around recruiting enough teachers, transforming the teaching profession, and retaining those teachers who are coming into the classroom. Since we talked about it last time, I'll go ahead and just pause there, but that's just a quick refresher of what this is built around.
Thank you, Emma. Sorry, and I made you go out of order. So what we accomplished last week at the end of the meeting was kind of talking about these pillar 2 output measures. And we landed on 6 of them being most salient. The first three, so we have measures of some sort of measure of state teacher production, and there's a variety of ways to do this. We had a robust conversation amongst the ex officio members of how that's currently measured in the state, and one of those is number of graduates. The next bullet, number of Maryland teaching fellow applicants and recipients. So there's funding that is to encourage teachers or students or potential pre-service students to apply for this funding. And then the number of qualified mentors for new teachers. And then the next three that were not as highly ranked as those were national board certification, number of candidates or effectiveness of the support program for national board certification, implementation of high quality induction programs, so helping those teachers get on board, and the number of applicants for teacher quality and diversity program grants. So that's not at the teacher level, but that's at the program level. Right? So that's where we ended our conversation last week. And Shamoya, I was just thinking about that when I was reading it out loud, Shamoya, that we'd want to make sure that we have the data on applicants that are disaggregated for the number of teacher, let's see, the second bullet, Shamoya especially, disaggregated by student characteristics. And all right, so that ends the output, except for Joe has his hand up. Joe.
Did we have anything in the output measures around teacher retention, or where does that belong in this?
That belongs as an outcome, which we are about to come to, but that's a thank you, Joe, for highlighting that.
Actually, I think I asked the exact same question last time and you gave me the answer. Sorry about that. I jumped.
Emma probably gave you the right answer last time. All right. So again, audience out there and everybody, if you have more thoughts about these measures, feel free to send in an AIB feedback form or talk to us offline. So next up is the logic model, because I skipped ahead. And then we're going to get to now the meat of our discussion today is the Pillar 2 outcome measures. So this is a reused slide from last time where we presented both the outputs on the left side and the outcomes on the right side. But there's so many potential Pillar 2 outcome measures that it takes a few pages, as I recall. Yeah. So we've got another set. So if you go back up to the first slide, not the first slide, but the slide before. Okay, so there's three slides of outcome measures. So we asked everyone in the advisory board, or sorry, in this work group, to rank this long list, 3-side list of outcome measures. And to remind you, this star for some of these are that there's no simple measure out there that already exists. So we'll really have to tackle trying to figure out how to come up with a metric for some of these things. And some of them, because we don't have the career ladder yet, or other reasons. Okay, so let's look at the results from the ranking. Is on the next slide. So there was a winner. I think most folks voted that at least in the top 5 should be the diversity of Maryland teachers compared with the diversity of the student population. So I don't know how much we need to talk about this, just because it has been one of the strong aims of the blueprint itself. But does anybody have something they'd want to share about that as a measure that we're going to set targets for? And if anybody wants me to walk through, for the folks who weren't here last week, last time we met, I guess, let me just walk through. So the blue, and I'm using my cursor, which is no help to you because you can't see where my cursor is, but the long blue is the number of folks who gave it a first place ranking. The orange is the number of folks who gave it a second place ranking. Gray is third place ranking, and yellow is fourth place ranking. Okay. So the longest bar is that diversity of Maryland teachers. So I'm gonna no comments on this one. Everybody's just on board. That's actually really nice. Can we, can we just say the whole group is on board with coming up with a metric for this and setting targets? Which the actual target itself may differ across LEAs depending on the context of that LEA. So next up, we have two at the bottom there that were, one of them was ranked more highly in terms of number of first place votes, but both of them, were acknowledged as being in the top 5 by 8 people. The one at the bottom is the number of teachers and leaders with the necessary expertise to fill designated roles on, and then I have to flip back to my prior slide.
I think it's on the career ladder. Sorry, Laura.
That's all right.
The
designated roles on the career ladder. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was seen as very important. That was the number 1 for 5 people in the group. So that's sounds like it's a very important measure, salient to folks. We have a current problem in that the career ladder is not defined across the LEAs. So it's an important thing, but we may not be there yet. Can people talk about this? And, maybe for those of you who ranked it number 1, what your thought was? No thoughts? Nobody remembers 3 weeks ago ranking this. All right. Wait, Queen came on camera. Does that mean you wanted to say something?
Yes, I'll just add, I definitely ranked this top 5, not sure where I ranked it, but definitely wanted to flag, like, we understand that part of the blueprint is to recruit teachers, and it's a big component of the blueprint. And so I know I ranked this just to say that, like, the blueprint, the career ladder, is contingent upon having an increased workforce, increased human capital to support many of the roles on the career ladder. So I think it'll be important for us just to see how these efforts are going to make sure that, like, the blueprint is actually successful in this area. So just adding that, that's why I had that as a top 5.
Thank you.
I think in some ways it also speaks to retention too, even though there is also a retention focused one, or one that's more focused on retention. If there are enough teachers at each level or leaders at each level, that would suggest that they continue to stay in the classroom. So that is an important consideration as well.
I mean, I also think, when this is all fully fleshed out, the achievement of the national board certification is one of the gateways that gets you to the higher rungs of the career ladder. So in some ways, this single measure also encompasses a lot of information around how many people have gone through and completed the national board certification.
Mm-hmm. And I should note, Emma, you are taking notes in the document, right? I kind of like looking at this picture though, instead of flipping between notes, but
I'm taking notes. Well, I'm taking notes off screen, but then also typing in some things as I can too. Yeah.
Okay. And Shamoya, you asked, is that a measure of quality? When you say that, are you referring to national board certification?
I am, and also this outcome measure overall.
What are people's thoughts on Shamoya's question? Is national board certification a measure of quality? Chelsea.
I think that's a tricky question because the blueprint incentivizes national board certification does not mean that the quality is always there. I think that's going to have to come back to local accountability on ensuring that those teachers are in the roles that they are able to fill at the highest level. If that makes sense. I mean, the hope would be that if they're nationally board certified, that the quality of their instruction is top notch. However, just because someone earned that does not mean that they're necessarily going to perform that way. So that's where I think the local accountability is going to have to come in for that piece.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, I'm slightly surprised by the question. It's been a while since I've had much to do with the national board, but it is supposed to be a measure of quality, an indicator of quality. And so I'm curious as to whether posing that question means, well, we're really not sure if it is or not, in which case, how important an indicator is it? I mean, if we don't know by now whether it's a measure of quality, I'm distressed that we don't know. Let me put it that way.
Well, I think there's a lot to be considered here. So we say that the Blueprint second pillar is focused on high quality and diverse teachers and school leaders. There are changes made to what it takes in the higher education realm as well as in terms of certification. We're making shifts there. So is national board certification the only measure of quality that we're using? Because I would argue, based on the data regarding who actually becomes nationally board certified, if we only use that measure, we're going to miss out on the achievements of men in the classroom, of Black and Brown educators, and more.
So I understand and appreciate that response, but it seems to me that would suggest that we should be looking at additional measures of quality, right? That will capture men or male teachers or other underrepresented teachers in the national board pool. Right. And I guess I'm asking, is it necessary to look to determine other quality indicators?
I would argue that it is when the national board certification process has been revealed to perpetuate inequities.
Okay. Rachel, did you want to chime in on this topic?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to, I think, state what I think most people know, but the Blueprint certainly uses national board certification as a measure of quality, and there are provisions in the law to encourage underrepresented educators, men, Black and Brown educators, to pursue national board certification so that they can receive the benefits of the salary compensation and the ability to move up the career ladder. So the Blueprint is certainly all in on national board, and also in terms of addressing the inequities of educators that have pursued national board certification in the past, which is why we have a national board support program as part of the Blueprint. And so I think, at least just from my perspective, as in everything, the way the AIB has approached the Blueprint implementation is we need to focus on implementing the Blueprint as the law provides, and give the national board process a chance to for other educators to pursue national board. And then if that after, I don't know how many years we want to look at data, we find that, there is an inequity, despite our attempts at addressing that, then we might need to consider another measure of quality in the future. Michael,
is your hands up again,
Oh.
or are you okay?
No, I just forgot to lower it.
No, sorry. Well, and I think perhaps, so one of our salient pillar 2 output measures was right now it's just listed as national board certification. But it could be that somewhere in there we can embed an indicator of whether there is equitable access to that opportunity and support for that opportunity. in the Pillar 2 output measure?
I do think that, just a quick thing, it was, number of NBC candidates versus the support program that's been created. And that was a discussion last time. We didn't really get to a conclusion on that. So that's why I couldn't really write more there, but that was one thing that was raised. Are there indicators of the support program's effectiveness that we should be identifying as output measures as opposed to the number of people pursuing NBC? So I think that that just goes back to our discussion last time.
All right, thanks. Keisha?
Thanks. I want to go back to what Michael raised, and I'm part of me in terms of thinking about the national board certification piece, both from he and Shamoya's perspective. One is it too narrow of a measure in terms of quality? And the one thing that I was looking up is national board certification free, right? So, or is that like, if it's a financial barrier for some teachers, then, you know, a measurement of quality only using that is perhaps we need to reconsider or think about additional measures of quality, given it's not a free certification process.
I just wanted to quickly note, Rachel put this in the chat, but that's a really good point. The blueprint does provide subsidies for NBC fees for teachers who are pursuing that, though. So just to note that really quickly, but that is a good consideration.
How large is the subsidy?
It covers the entire cost.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. All right. Let's, this has been a healthy conversation, and I would love for this type of conversation to happen for all of these. So please continue this sort of chat. Let's go to the next one that had also 8 people who indicated that this item was amongst their top 5. The percentage, and before I do this, Keisha, let me know that Shamoya had her hand up. Sorry, I didn't see that, Shamoya. Shamoya?
Thank you very much. I won't belabor the point. It's okay. We can move on, but I appreciate it, Keisha.
So this next item, percentage of pre-K to 12 teachers and principals who continue serving in Maryland public, and I had it and I've lost it now, but basically who continue working in the schools. So it's a measure for more than 5 years across the state and by LEA subject area, grade level, and in high needs schools. That's a lot. But so basically this is retention in the schools for 5 years. About a little more than half the people thought this would be top 5. Thoughts? Is 5 years a magic number? Does anyone who didn't put it in their top 5 want to chime in and explain why it wasn't in their top 5? If you even remember. And Joe added in the chat that the research shows that 5 years to be a real inflection point for teacher departures. All right. Is there too much overlap with this idea of enough teachers and leaders with necessary experience to fill the designated career ladder levels? Because once you're in for 5 years, you have completed the necessary years that you need in order to become eligible to be NBC. Will these be duplicative? Are they each important?
Can I ask a question? the percentage of pre-K 12 teachers and principals who continue serving in Maryland public schools, is that tied to national board certification or overall? I thought it was an overall.
No, it's overall,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I would imagine it will correlate with the if we have, whether we have enough people to fill the roles in NBC. Because if you don't have retention, then there's no way folks can fill those positions on the ladder, I think was the thought. They're not
Gotcha.
super highly correlated, I don't think, but I think that there
Right.
will be some correlation there.
Hopefully.
No comments on this one? All right, we'll go to the next one, which is related to NBC again. It's sort of midway up. There's 6 folks who ranked in the top 5. The percentage of national board certified teachers serving as classroom teachers in low something. Sorry, I'm finding it. I'm not finding
It's
it.
in low performing schools.
Low performing schools. Thank you.
Yeah.
Across the state. Okay, the second one. Thoughts on this one? Is this important enough to set targets at?
To me, it seems like just having national board, the number or percentage of number and percentage of national board certified teachers across the state as a general metric would be really important, and then disaggregating it amongst all of the various groupings that we have identified. But for this one in particular, disaggregating it for national board certified teachers that have opted to either get certified in a low-income school or move to a low-income school after becoming board certified.
Joe, is the distinction between moving to or being certified while in an important distinction, or it's just
I think it is a little, at the end of the day, functionally, it's no different for the students, but it is, part of our strategy was that there are financial incentives for individuals who are nationally board certified to move to lower performing schools. So if the theory is working, then the incentive would be a lure to get higher quality teachers that have been identified through the national board process into schools that are lower performing and need better teachers. Yeah, and I think Shimoya's question is a good one. I think the way that it has been designated as low performing, and I think right now the way that's been identified, I don't know if this is through MSD who does the identification, but I think it's schools that have 1 or 2 stars according to the star rating system would be schools that would be eligible for the additional financial incentive if you are a national board certified teacher.
yeah, and there's a lot of talk in the chat, and we're going to piece through each piece, but to finish Joe's conversation in that piece, I believe that there was a sort of an interim definition of low performing for this year, and that MSDE might be reconsidering that, and I'm not sure if anybody knows any update from that, either Rachel or if there's somebody from MSDE here.
Hi, Laura. This is Chandra.
Hi, Chandra.
So we rolled out a framework 1.0 to identify the schools for that low performing status for nationally board certified teachers, and it is to the point that was just made, it is schools that have 1 or 2 stars over 2 of the last 3 consecutive years based on the accountability system. And then there's also a component where there's some local flexibility. So locals can identify schools in their bottom 10% of schools, I believe is what it is. So every local school system can actually have a school that would be available for that nationally board low or be considered nationally board certified low performing school.
Okay, thank you, Chandra.
Sure.
So let's go back to some questions in here. Shamoya asked, is it about them being there? I think that the National Board Certified Teachers or the students' performance as a result. And Queen said, my understanding is that the blueprint assumes that their presence will increase performance. And I think that's an accurate reading of what that's about. Michael, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I want to weigh in on the same issue, because it occurs to me that the presence of board certified teachers, right, in what had been a low performing school would matter if the school has the leadership and culture and strategies for continuous improvement that would actually result in better outcomes. But it's probably not the case if a board certified teacher shows up in a low performing school and nothing about how the school operates changes. You're not likely to see much better results. I'm not sure how to capture that in a statement here, but I think we need to think hard about how you can describe and test out the theory behind all this so that you don't wind up not so that it has the effect that you want it to have. And I can't figure out a way to say it clearly.
Well, yeah, Emma, can you write a note about kind of adding it to the research agenda of the IB of examining change in
student performance, which, you know, the other thing too, of course, like we're looking at pillar 2 outcome measures now, but the blueprint isn't just pillar 2, right? It's not just about improving teacher quality or bringing teachers to NBC teachers to new schools, you know, absent any other changes. We have pillars 3, which we're talking about today, and 4, 5, 1. So just wanted to add that plug in. And I know that we are focused on pillar 2 right now, but it wouldn't just, there isn't an expectation for improved student performance simply due to NBC teachers.
Just one other thought.
Right. That must be hard to track though in terms of their effect though. I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
It might be worth checking with the folks at the national board. This can't be the first state, right, that has wrestled with this issue, right? And somebody has had to figure this out already.
Right.
And we should try to take advantage of others who've done this, and the board staff ought to be able to help.
Yeah, definitely. I know that they have some reports on their website that I've, or just in general, on improved student performance correlated with NBC teachers. So I'm sure that we can touch base with them.
All right. I don't know if I captured everything that is in the chat. Actually, there's new things in the chat that I haven't seen. Okay, so there's a whole conversation about how the NBC is being subsidized. And I have to go on mute and cough a lot right now, so I'm going to hand it over to Emma or Joe.
Okay, sorry, sorry, Laura. Okay, so I was just looking through. I know that there's some conversation in the chat around NBC certification and costs, and I think that we touched on that a little bit earlier, but we'll follow up as needed with some of the questions there. Okay. I'm looking at the next one. I think we have a couple of people who voted for average starting salary. Or actually, before we get off the conversation around the career ladder, I know that we had a couple of people vote for percentage of teachers participating in the career ladder. And that seems like it could also potentially have some overlap with the supply of teachers who are filling in the different levels of the career ladder based off of their expertise. So I'm wondering about about how those would be differentiated.
So actually, what does it mean? Percentage of teachers participating in the career ladder? I mean, they're all in the career ladder. There's no choice. They're just at different levels of the career ladder. Would that be accurate statement?
No, I'll let Rachel, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the career ladder is optional. So
Oh.
teachers can choose whether they want to participate in the career ladder or not. At one point, the commission had recommended that all new teachers be required to go onto the career ladder, but that was not in the final legislation.
So, but what's the lowest rung of the career ladder?
So what's confusing is that the statute was written as if all teachers would be on the career ladder, and that was never changed when the final decision was made that not all teachers, that it was optional. So the way the career ladder is constructed, there is sort of a, level 1 is a certified teacher. Level 2 is pursuing national board. Level 3 is earning national board. And then level 4 is the additional positions of lead teacher and distinguished teacher and the third one, professor.
So what distinguishes somebody from a certified teacher who's in the classroom or in a school from the level 1 on the career ladder? Like, are they opting out, saying, don't count me as part of that number? Or
yeah, essentially the career ladder begins when a teacher receives national board certification.
the career ladder begins, I thought level 2 is they're seeking.
Or seeking, but until
Okay.
you earn it, until you earn national board certification under the career ladder, there's no additional compensation or responsibilities. So the additional compensation and responsibilities come upon earning national
Level
board
3.
certification.
Okay. All right.
I do wonder, this is just an idea, because we did talk about the big overlap with the number of, or potential overlap with the number of teachers and leaders with necessary expertise to fill the designated roles on the career ladder. Then we also have percentage of pre-K through 12 teachers who stay on for more than 5 years. Then we also have this one around the percentage of teachers participating in the career ladder. And since the career ladder is not going to be in place until July 1st, 2024, I'm just wondering if tracking the number of people who have the necessary expertise to fill all of the roles on the career ladder would be something to look at later on. And initially, it might make more sense to look at outcome measures related to the percentage of teachers who are pursuing NBC and intending to participate in the career ladder initially, along with the percentage of pre-K through 12 teachers and leaders who are staying on for more than 5 years to reflect that critical inflection point. That's just an idea.
Do we have any current measure or way to obtain teachers considering? You had mentioned teachers who are going to be seeking national board certification.
I don't know if we have a way to measure that. We do have reports of projections for cohorts of NBC teachers in the implementation plans, but Rachel, do you know of anything besides that?
The only thing I can think of is there is a sort of an application process for receiving the fee support. So we would be able to know the number who were, requesting the fee support to pursue national board.
And is the fee support is an individual level? It's not an LEA program level? Okay.
Right.
Important notes. But yeah, Emma, I appreciate how you saw several things and figured out how to rank them in terms of implementation timeline and how to possibly combine them.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
a lot of sense to me to sort of start with the leading indicator. So we've talked about this before, and then transition to a different measure, once we've gotten beyond the leading indicator timeline.
All right, so speaking of teachers, there's also somebody ranked this number one, but 5 people ranked it overall in the top 5. The average salary for Maryland teachers, disaggregated by experience in the classroom. And there's also another one right below it, the average starting salary for teachers, Maryland teachers. So I think we should probably talk about them as a group, something about salary. Michael, it looks like you want to talk. Would you like to talk? No.
No, actually.
Okay. So there was supposed to be salary increases via the blueprint or as specified by the blueprint, Rachel?
I was just gonna say, the blueprint does require a minimum starting salary of 60,000 beginning in fiscal 2027. So the LEAs are working towards that. And so we're definitely, whether it's a metric or not, whether it's one of these measures or not, it's definitely something that will be tracked.
Is it target worthy? Like, is it, there's a minimum specified in the law. So that's sort of supposed to happen, should happen. But is it worth it to say, well, you know what? We're going to set a target that it raises $2,000 every year, or
That's a great question. The commission's approach to identifying the salary requirements for teachers was to look at other professions that have similar credential requirements and to look at what the average salary was for those professions, and then to essentially to peg the target that teachers should, be treated the same. So that as high school students are deciding what career to go into, they have, a good incentive to choose education because the salaries are comparable. So that if we wanted to set a target, there is a methodology that the commission used that we could use to set a target. And that is where the combination of the 10% salary increase and the additional salary support for national board teachers and for the career ladder, the combination of those amounts were intended to bring the Maryland average salary to near, at the time, this was several years ago, looking at the average for other professions in Maryland and also in the states that the commission was looking at, which were Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New Hampshire. So the salary increases in the blueprint were intended to, at the time, bring Maryland teacher salaries up to the average of what professions in Maryland and teachers in other states were making.
So we don't really have anybody from the HR side of the districts in the room here, but we do have Queen, who's on the HR side of teaching as a whole. But does anybody have any comments about, is this something to set targets on, the average starting salary or just the average salary by years of experience? Welcome, Ivory.
Good afternoon.
Joe?
I mean, I would advocate around, having this in the category of the things that the AIB is tracking, but not necessarily something that's elevated to the kind of public facing dashboard, just because I feel like while this is important, like we have a limited, we're going to have a limited number of things that we really want to focus on and track. And I would say, some of the other ones that have been discussed, really even in the last hour, I think are, to me, more critical for student success.
Megan?
So I agree with Joe, and I think that this is probably information that's available already for recruitment materials that they use to get teachers to come to Maryland, especially when they're going outside the state to recruit. So you'll see the difference, but this is annually as they go out, all their systems are already publishing these numbers.
All right, given the time, I want to turn to a set of the next ones that aren't quite as popular as the other ones, but are still there, and they're on a different topic. They're about teacher candidates. So we have the second from the top, we have the number of teaching candidates who annually enroll in and successfully graduate from program, I imagine. And then it's okay. Oh, thank you. And then a few items down, we have I just saw it. Now I've lost it. The diversity of teacher preparation candidates from Maryland colleges compared to, I would imagine it says the student population. And then I also saw another one that was about the diversity of teacher preparation graduates from Maryland colleges compared to so we have graduates versus candidates, diversity of. And then also fifth from the top, we just have 2 votes, but one of them was a first rank vote. The rate of teaching candidates earning licensure by subject area disaggregated. So this is about teacher candidacy. And remind me, we had an output though, a pillar 2 output that was a measure of the state teacher production, perhaps number of graduates from approved state preparation programs. So there's a little bit of duplication here. So talk a little bit, folks, about that suite of measures, about an outcome of teachers, new teachers or new teachers certified in subject area, diversity. It seems less salient to people than diversity of the teaching population. And then, just by rankings and the retention of teachers. However, diversity of new teachers is more likely to change more quickly than the diversity of the teacher population, period, just given the overwhelming number of current teachers in our system. To move the proportion of teachers of certain race ethnicities is going to take a long time to move. Ivory?
Yeah, and I know I'm just jumping in. I apologize for having another meeting. But there was an article that came out last weekend that looked at census numbers and showed that there are about 250,000 less teachers who are working today than before the pandemic. And so I think that as we think about this, we should think about the national teaching shortage and try to understand to what extent Maryland is facing some of the same issues as the rest of the nation in terms of retaining teachers and making sure that our measures, respect some of the newer challenges that happen in the post-pandemic era.
Thank you. So maybe set it as a differential retention, is our retention better than the national average instead of just, are we losing teachers? Well, if we're losing teachers at a lower rate than everywhere else, then that's a good place to be in.
Yeah. And I agree with a lot of the first votes. I see that the higher standards wasn't that popular. And I'd be if we were to move forward with that, I am interested in what the higher standards are, because a lot of times higher standards as defined classically can reduce the diversity. So one can compete with the other, so like if higher standards is higher scores on a certification examination, and the certification examination may have some racial biases in it, which has been, pretty well established. You could have one that's competing against the other.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on the kind of the suite of the teacher prep items on this list? Megan?
So I just want to point out that entering into licensure is different than graduating from a program, right? So that's the next step, and that happens in our local education agencies. And that's something that we've been working towards understanding through MLDS data. But there are some gaps there that we definitely want to make sure we can do in order to measure that appropriately. And also account for those coming to us from other states, because we do import a lot of teachers.
Right. So if you had to choose one measure, which one would you choose?
We would want the longitudinal. Where were they prepped, and then how were they prepped, and then where are they getting the licensure? So it's combining them, but also looking longitudinally of their preparation.
So let me just turn your attention quickly to two that we have not talked at all about. Is the first one, teacher perception of school redesigns and new roles resulting from the career ladder implementation. And then the fifth one down, reported LEA satisfaction with graduates of Maryland teacher preparation programs. So not highly ranked by folks. Are folks okay with that? Megan, is that you again? Or is that old? It's okay.
Sorry,
if it's
but
you again.
I didn't mean to do that, but no, I
Oh.
would definitely say that, yeah, like a satisfaction. I mean, that's something that we hope through all the collaborations and everything with the blueprint work that we'll be able to get to, but as a measure and a public measure, I don't think that's necessary.
Sorry, Laura, if I can go back to Megan, when you were making the statement about teacher prep and licensure, what is, like, in your longitudinal data that you've seen, obviously you may not be able to say offhand right now, but like how different are like the number of folks who are prepped in one state and then licensed in another? Is it significantly like different from where people are prepped and licensed, where candidates are prepped and licensed?
Well, that I would defer to my MLDS colleagues that have dove into that more than I have, because I have not gotten into that. But I do know that just data gaps in general of being able to obtain and do the matching and then look longitudinally, even within our own state from our programs to what we know where they are with licensure is tricky. But we do tend to import from many other states as well. So that's something to think about, because we want to be able to compare. But again, as a measure for the public, I'm not quite sure we're ready to be able to do that yet, but I'll defer to Angie or anyone from MLDS that want to comment.
Anne, I know you're there. I don't know if you want to comment or not.
Yes, I'm here. So yeah, it's definitely all of this grouping around things, even related to the language of teacher preparation graduates, is challenging because they're really educator preparation programs, and some of them are dedicated within colleges of education and some of them are not, right? So in some of our colleges, the way you become a math teacher is through the math program. In some of our colleges, the way you become a teacher is through a teacher education college. So all of this language is very tricky to try to figure out exactly how to measure. And then we have the interesting split of, is this about initial licensure? And that's one lens. Or what also happens is some of our educator preparation programs, students complete a major at a college and then come in as a non-degree seeking student to complete a cluster of courses that allows them to sit for licensure. So it's very, very difficult because it's like apples and carrots and chicken, right? It's not the same kind of thing to how to break with even just the basic vegetable kind of analogy or fruit analogy. I'm happy to help sort that out when you're ready to sort that out. It's just really, really hard. And we have established a dedicated Maryland approved program data collection, which we are in the midst of regathering data that go back to 2018, because there was a lot of confusion about who to include, who not to include, and how to code them, because it's not visible in just generic enrollment data. So we had to develop a special collection to try to focus on that, to which we have now just in this next year, we'll be adding some indicator variables around enrollment in those programs, because the completers collection, as its name suggests, is about people who complete, not people who enroll, right? So that's your crash course in the data that we have. And again, when the dust settles and you kind of decide what to do, I'm happy to help figure that out.
Yeah, no, I think that's super helpful. And I'm asking because I'm thinking of Laura's question. And again, our goal is to say, like, what effectively tells the story of the blueprint. And so it sounds like this may not, because the data is like a salad, right? Like it might not be super helpful in telling the story in the way that we want to, even though the data is helpful, it might not tell that story effectively. Right. So thank you.
Yeah. And I would just add that even with some of the new data, and I know Chandra was on earlier, she can speak to this better than I can. I know Molly wasn't able to attend today. Some information is being collected on preparation out of state, but all of that I just told you is stuff we can know about in-state students. Otherwise, we just kind of know you're from Penn State and you did a thing, and we're not going to be able to unpack that nuance of the out-of-state teacher in terms of their educational pathway into teaching. So that's another kind of slight layer. And I think at one point, some of my comments had been about, you may want to focus these on things like Maryland colleges, because at least I can tell you something about the people who became teachers and how they got there, right? I can back into their records once I see them as a teacher.
Got it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for lurking, Anne. All right, I am going to switch over to pillar 3 now. I feel Emma's happiness. So if we go to the next pillar, and we're going to hand this over, I think, to Jackie to kind of talk through the logic map.
Sorry about that. I just was trying to get my mute turned to turn my mute off. Again, as you know, because I've talked at the last couple of outcome measures group meetings that we're working on trying to create logic maps of the different pillars, and have introduced each one as a definite draft. And this one is a definite draft because pillar 3 is complicated. And they're just putting this on the table as something for you guys to look at, and you might need to sort of look at it offline because there's a lot in here. But just to give you sort of some highlights about how we approached this. As with the other ones, you'll see that we have some arrows leading into the dark purple box at the left there, to indicate the connection between this pillar and the other pillars that high quality teachers and leaders and students entering school ready to learn are key supports, are key things that are going to enable the work in this pillar to actually lead to what we want the blueprint to result in. We tried to organize it around an overall goal of building an aligned high quality instructional system, and saw sort of two pieces of that. One, a set of tasks that are going to help students reach the CCR standards, And at the bottom, the darker purple is providing robust post-CCR pathways that prepare students for their future, and try to organize the set of tasks under those two headers. We have the setting the CCR standard aligned with the literacy and math and requirements for first year college, sort of embedded in the first in the light purple stuff, because we see it as, you know, that's where you're organizing the instruction around, and follow that with the tasks of developing high quality instruction aligned with that, and then tried to group a lot of the support pieces together under that, both the support for helping kids be on track through the CCR, including the 9th grade tracker, and including some of the career counseling that happens before kids enter the post CCR pathways, to get them ready to be moving on to what's the right pathway for them. And then have the other tasks around creating the post CCR pathways at the bottom there. The red diamonds, has been the code for the expected outcomes. Right now we have 3 expected outcomes in this pillar. I think it's sort of a question as to whether we want to leave setting the CCR standard there as an outcome, or if that's embedded, if we see that as something that's embedded in the work of the first set of tasks around creating the system that's based on the CCR. And then the language, then we have the other 2 tasks, the other 2 expected outcomes, which are kind of lined up with those 2 sets of tasks. Just in terms of the measures on the side, just to understand the color coding, the ones that are in blue are ones that we were having a conversation about the first draft of this. We're considering, we're having some initial discussions about whether those should be raised to the blueprint level. I think our sort of guiding ideas about which measures are at the blueprint level as opposed to a pillar level are around ones that clearly need the input of multiple pillars, aren't something that is going to, we're not going to, without high quality teachers and without students ready to learn and without some of the sports from pillar 4, not sure we're going to reach, those need to be part of the work of getting kids to reach the CCR. And we've had some discussions about moving some of those to the blueprint level, those kind of student outcomes. So those are in blue right now to mark that. The ones that are the other ones there are ones around seeing whether we have this system in place, that what this pillar is about, and some of the kinds of data that we would look at to make judgments about that is in the green box, where we've had these before about the kind of data that we would track. The ones that are highlighted, just for you to know, that was based on our discussion yesterday with Rachel and Emma and crew. Those were ones that we had the potential of thinking about moving up to the blueprint level as well. So we were just marking those because those were we thought more aligned with tracking whether the students were reaching the outcomes that were dependent on multiple pillars. Anyway, there's a lot of text here, so just sort of giving you a sense of how we were thinking about that. And Emma or Rachel, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
Or if anybody has questions for Jackie about how to use this, how to think about it.
If you can read the tiny text.
Yeah, this is definitely,
which I have.
You need to zoom in.
I'm looking closely at the printout of it on that piece of paper.
But anyone who filled out a implementation plan template and saw how big the pillar 3 section is, you know why there's a lot of text on here. There's a lot in pillar 3.
And I mean, again, just to remind us of one of the reasons that Emma and Rachel and folks were asking if we would share this while you were having these conversations, was to kind of remind ourselves of going through the logic of what we were trying to do in each of these pillars, and think about whether the ways we're thinking about tracking the data and seeing if these things get implemented and seeing if we're reaching the outcomes are sort of lined up with that theory of what we're trying to do. So it's sort of a check on the outcome measures that we're thinking about. The measures.
Well, thank you, Jackie. Let's move Emma then to just to remind folks, we had 11 potential Pillar 3 output measures on the left side of this chart. And then on the right side, there's 16 different outcome measures for Pillar 3, and it goes on to a second slide. But let's jump down to the ranking. So for the output, remember, and this relates to what Jackie just said about, are the systems in place to support students in CCR. There was, in terms of the number of people ranking it in the top 5, there's a clear winner of student access to college prep courses, AP, IB, Cambridge. I wonder if there should be other things in that list. And I was wondering whether dual degree should also be in there, or in theory, the access, student access to college prep courses, that's about access, but we also could talk about the use of or involvement in as a measure as well. But discuss this measure.
Yeah, I think calculus and physics should be included in that also.
We were, yes, to Dr. Tolton, to your point, following our conversation on Thursday, we were talking this morning, and, we do have those examples in there of college prep courses, but the prerequisites for competitive four-year institutions or whatever that students need to be able to apply, and ensuring that they have access to those as well. That came up in terms of broadening how we think about this access to college prep courses. It's not just advanced placement.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks.
And Shamoya asked a question of, does access mean available in the school generally or to specific student groups? And also Angie mentioned access does not equal encouragement to take. Would there be any way to think about that?
Yeah, I was going to say the same or some similar in terms of students being tracked away from those courses. So how will we address that? Because even if the courses exist, a lot of students are still not going to have access because they have to get permission to take them.
Absolutely. I think that that was part of, maybe we need to use a different term than access even. I think that that's why we used access versus offer. But maybe there's a more specific term that gets at some of those potential roadblocks that are currently in place around access.
Oh, Keisha, that's interesting. For Keisha, access means student actually enrolled. At least that's how they talk about it in their district. Interesting.
Yeah, because when we talk about equity of access, we're focused on what does the access, meaning enrollment in either AP, IB courses look like for our students disaggregate, right? So that shows our equity of access. Or so I guess I'm wondering, for what I heard, and I see Emily put in eligible, I'm thinking like what's available in the school, like what for in a district. But again, to the questions that were raised, if we're just talking about what is available, that doesn't, at least for me, mean it's accessible for all students.
I think additionally, there are like access issues. I don't know if access is the best word, but issues in terms of students who have access to tutors to actually be able to score on the courses and get college credit for those courses. And disproportionately, Black and brown students don't end up having access to those resources that allow them to test well enough to actually get college credit for those courses. So how are we thinking about, I guess, access and success in those courses?
Just to add to what Natasha just shared, I think we think about it in that perspective too, right? It's one thing to actually be enrolled or have access to the course, but it's another thing, what does the success look like? Because we don't want to have a number of students enrolled or accessing a course, but then they aren't supported in the manner that they need to be successful in that course. So I definitely what you shared resonated with me.
Yeah, I think originally I was thinking, should this be students enrolled in college prep courses? But then after Dr. McClendon's statement, maybe it's students' successful completion of college prep courses. And then if we were to going through and disaggregating all of this data as we are for all of these measures, then we would be able to see if there are big achievement gaps amongst various demographics of students.
Yeah, I think that's important, but in many ways, we do look at who's completing, but I don't think that we have really looked at who has the access, who offers the classes. So it may be two different outcome measures, but I think that it's, you know, to get more Black and brown students to take AP courses, you know, that's a laudable goal. But within the current structure, a lot of them would have to move away from their school in order to do that, and we just wouldn't get the kind of gains that we need to get. So I think having it available, having access to it, having equity in it, and having the completion, all of that needs to be embedded in this.
If we have the completion and it's 0% across the board for a given school, can we then just assume that it's not available? I mean, can that completion capture then availability, access, and performance? Or do we, or I mean, it's possible that it could be 0 and everybody had access and nobody performed well.
Right. Yeah, there needs to be a deeper understanding of the system, because there may be, I think some schools can allow their students to take it in other schools. And so they can say every student has access to it, but it's more difficult for students at this school to take it. I see some other hands are up, and probably people who know more than me on this issue.
Rachel, you're the other hands, I think.
Yeah, actually, Emily's hand was up first.
Oh, I can't see. Oh, I don't know where. Sorry, Emily.
No worries. And Rachel, please. I mean, so I was just going to add, AP is a little tricky. Some of you may be aware of this. It's one thing to take an AP course. It's another thing to actually sit for the AP exam. And as I understand it, I am not an expert in this, but as I understand it, there are challenges for particular students because there's a cost to take the AP exam. You have to go someplace sometimes to take the AP exam. Students may not want to take the AP exam. So there are nuances even within each of the three, the AP, IB, and Cambridge, that have barriers even within them that may be hard to capture, or just things to be considered. Just because a student may be able to take an AP course may not mean that they can take the AP exam. And there may be additional barriers to getting that. And the same thing for Cambridge and the same thing for IB.
Yeah, certainly AP exam fees have been are a barrier for a lot of students. That is something that the blueprint addresses in the post-CCR pathways. So the law requires, beginning this coming year, that students have access to these post-CCR pathways at no cost to the student or their families. So that includes exam fees. That includes, that also applies to CTE programs. So it includes equipment. Different CTE programs have different requirements for equipment and things that students, have to purchase to be able to participate, which has been a barrier, as well as the actual industry credential. In many cases, there are fees involved in earning the credential, and under the blueprint, those fees are also covered. So hopefully that alleviates a lot of the barriers. I'm sure not all of them, and we'll have to make sure that we're focused on that. The other thing that the blueprint does require is that, to Dr. Tolson's point, that every high school has to offer at least one pathway in each of the three. So that includes the more selective college prep pathway, the dual enrollment sort of pathway, and then the CTE pathway. So they have to offer at least one of in each pathway, at least one option. And but they can do that through, particularly in some of the more rural areas of the state. Not every high school is going to be offering all of the AP courses that a student might want to take. So they do have the ability to offer it at another high school and make arrangements for that student to be able to participate. But that would include either making it available virtually or transporting the student to that high school, or to the community college, so that they can take advantage of that. So it's certainly not, I mean, I'm sure there are more barriers that we're going to need to address, but the blueprint did try to make sure that some of those financial barriers are removed.
Thank you, Rachel. Ann?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Kind of building on what you're saying, and I dropped in the chat, it's great that there are subsidies to think about the students and their costs and that, but what about, student to teacher ratios and allowing classes to run with smaller class sizes? I mean, that's really, I just know from a lot of the work we do with the data from these schools that there are a lot of small populations. And if we want to offer like a range of classes, there has to be the ability to teach a physics class with 3 students, right? Or a foreign language class with 2 students. So it's just something to think about where that fits in the structure of, I struggled with ranking some of these about kind of both the numbers and counts because of that, just knowing that that's the reality, that they can't actually run a class because there aren't enough kids.
Maybe that's something to consider tracking alongside the other measures, perhaps internally for Pillar 2 around, staffing for advanced placement courses, not just positions on the career ladder, although that will in part correlate.
Thank you. I want to switch to a different measure. So the next longest bar down is the percentage of middle and high schools that provide students with career counseling in alignment with blueprint requirements to learn about post-secondary education and career opportunities, or something there. We had a range of folks consider this 1st through 5th ranked. Comments? Are all schools just going to say yes, they do? I mean, is this a 100% metric that's not going to be very exciting over time?
It should be, because it's required. But as we all know, what gets measured gets done.
There's a related item, which is, where is it? Oh, at the top, student satisfaction with career counseling. So this is not is the school providing it? This is the student perception, and this specifies career counseling, but it could be that we define it more broadly to be college going and career counseling. Thoughts about the person who's reporting this information?
I think if we had to choose one between these two, it would make a lot of sense to focus on the student perception because, and I think we've cited some examples of this in other areas, since it's required by law, we'll be getting information as to whether it's happening anyway.
Chelsea, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess my only comment to this would be, and maybe it's looking more at the outcome side of it, but not only are the schools offering career counseling, but the impacts of that career counseling for those students. And I think that's really what is very important in this output is maybe the outcomes that are associated with it, because what we're looking at here, I mean, the output is kind of a yes or no, they are, they're not, and they should be, like Ms. Heiss had shared, but what is the benefit of that career counseling? Like, what are our students doing post-secondary? Are they getting into education? Are they getting into a career? What does that look like? Just like higher education universities or platforms follow through with their students as far as what they pursued or what career they sought after that, I think is really the important part of this output.
Thank you. Joe?
So this is not a reason not to focus on either of these, but I presume for both of these, we would have to go through and set up separate data collection measures, because I don't know of a place where this information would currently be captured that we could draw upon as a data point.
Ivory?
Yeah, I was wondering if we would also measure the counselor to student ratio, because I would believe that at schools where they have fewer counselors for each student, some of the services will be compromised.
Queen?
I think my other thought with the student satisfaction with career counseling was, at what point are you measuring that? So to, I think Chelsea's point, it's more like the outcome of the career counseling, which I don't think you capture while the student is currently receiving services, because even the student themselves, like, they have to be more like reflective of the benefits of that counseling, and that likely won't happen until they've matriculated from high school. So that's my thought on that one.
Thank you. Rachel?
I was thinking about just what Queen was saying, but I think that there could be a benefit to surveying students to see if the services that they're receiving are what they need or what they think they need. I mean, ultimately, obviously, we want to longitudinally track all of this, but I do think there could be a benefit in sort of trying to get the students' perception of whether the way that the career counseling is being provided is actually, are they actually, their interests being taken into consideration. I'm trying to think of how we could get at questions and responses that would sort of try to ensure that tracking is not happening. And I don't know what that would be, but I think it would be important to try to gather data like that. And the CTE committee so career counseling is a specific new middle and high school career counseling is a specific new program under the blueprint. The funding is provided, and we actually have just been in the midst of reviewing all of the career counseling MOUs for the programs that are going to start up this fall. And the CTE committee is actually charged with, right now it's a 3-year kind of pilot program. And the CTE committee is charged with doing a evaluation of the programs and recommending best practices for how the local workforce boards and the LEAs and the community colleges are providing their career counseling. And part of what we're gonna need to do is identify what exactly what we're talking about here. What outcome measures, what program measures should be taken into account in identifying the best practices. So this is definitely something that will need to be done, whether it is part of these outcome measures or what the CTE committee is going to be looking at in their evaluation. I think
Chelsea?
Chelsea has her
Yeah.
hand up.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to compare this to is, I come from a special ed lens, and through special education within the IEPs, we're required to have that transition section. And so we're constantly creating secondary transition activities for students that we are progress monitoring at least every quarter to make sure that our students are aware of their post-secondary options and so forth. And so part of that from a special ed lens is us completing so many interviews with the student, so many post-secondary assessments with the student, creating formal plans based on what they want to do and what outcomes they need to hit to reach that goal. So for example, if a student wants to go into auto mechanics, area of auto mechanics you want to look like? How about you interview someone in that field? How about you have a job experience in that area? And so we're constantly keeping our students on track with those post-secondary outcomes that they have set for themselves. Obviously, that would be a big task to tackle with every single student in the state of Maryland, but I bring that up because within that, we also do kind of like those whole group things with our students. So for our students with disabilities, we have a specific secondary transition fair in which we bring in those outside agencies, organizations, kind of like a local job fair in a sense, where they can get to know what those options are and what those services that different organizations and agencies provide post-secondary. And so maybe that's something, Ms. Heiss, through that committee that you all can look at, as that would then help the outcome measures as well for us, as far as are there indicators that we can build on that would show that we are providing effective career counseling to support students post-secondary.
Thanks, that's a great idea. Secondary and post-secondary, yeah.
Now I was thinking, I don't know if MSDE would appreciate this, but I wonder if there's just a question or two we can add to the Maryland School Survey. There's already a mechanism that's going out to the students. Can a few items be added just about their experience in receiving counseling support or career and support? So, but let's put a pin in that to discuss more later. There's a couple other items I definitely want to get to talk about today. There's two more that have a lot of votes and have first ranked votes. One is number of supports such as tutors offered at the school level to students who do not meet benchmarks. And I'm not sure if the benchmarks here are the CCR benchmarks, or it could also be in this pillar, we have third grade reading on grade level for third grade. As well as there was a lot of votes, first place votes for second to the bottom one, percentage of school districts offering a pre-K to 12 instructional system fully aligned to the CCR standard. Remember this, we're just talking about outputs here. So we're talking about, is the system in place? So these are both sort of system related things. One, the number of supports offered, or something about the supports offered. And then two, the percentage of schools or districts offering a fully aligned to the CCR standard. So discuss.
And last week when we discussed this, it sounded like the CCR standards is something that is it under development or is it complete? And how, if it's complete, how easy would it be to evaluate a school's alignment with it?
So there is an interim standard now, which is a performance level on the ELA and the math assessments. there is a report due by September, or the final report is going to be available in August from a contractor on their findings about what the CCR standard potentially could be or should be. I imagine based on the interim report that we saw that GPA may play a role in that. But I think the second half of your question, Ivory, is like the number one question, is how would we determine whether the instructional materials, or excuse me, whether the instructional system is fully aligned with this to support reaching that standard? Joe?
So while I think this measure around number of supports offered to school at the school level to students who don't meet benchmarks is really, really critical. I feel like this is going to be a really, really hard one to measure and track. Unless we provide some more definition to what we are looking for. Because is this are these classroom level supports? Is this are these supports that can be provided by a teacher, is by a classroom aide, by a special educator? Like it seems like there's so many different ways in which support could be provided, and without giving some more definition to that, I think a lot of this is going to be self-reported by schools, and for the most part they would all say that all the kids are getting some level of support, whether it's working or not, or how intensive or not, or if the dosage is correct. We wouldn't have that information based on this measure, and I think that would be really, really critical to understanding if the intervention is working and if it's having an impact.
So along the lines with tutoring, the law does specify that it should be in groups of 4 to 6 students. Like that is the aim for smaller groups in terms, so that would influence the number of tutors available if that's the support that we want to go with. So I just wanted to name that, and just wondering then if it makes sense to set targets around that, since that is a requirement in the law. Going back to one of those things that is specified there. But it was brought up earlier, the conversation around, I don't mean to bring us back to this measure, but access versus availability and supports for students in college prep courses. Maybe it's worth it to consider expanding this understanding of supports to beyond just what's offered to students who do not meet critical benchmarks, but students who are in some of these support pathways, or not support pathways, post CCR pathways in these college prep courses to help them succeed. So that's just I'm wondering if we want to keep it to just for students who do not meet specific benchmarks.
Pillar 3 is the hardest one, is all I have to say. Part of it is the ambiguity about the CCR standard, and Michael, thumbs up, but also a question or response. Go for it, Michael.
Yeah, the thumbs up was a mistake. So there was part of this discussion in the draft logic map, and mentioned a couple of minutes ago, that gets at the question of whether there's a coherent instructional program right in place that's aligned to the standards. And to me, being aligned to the standards doesn't mean just being aligned to whatever the cut score on whatever test kids are going to take in order to be considered college ready. It's really, is there an instructional system K-12 that's aligned to the math and English language arts standards, that's designed to help kids successfully move through the curriculum? And there are a couple starting points for that. It would take some work, but for example, RAND Corporation has been tracking teacher use of instructional materials. And as they've done that, they have built out a framework for looking at the coherence of the instructional program. Starts with the curriculum materials, but it's more multidimensional than that. That's one way to come at this that people have done some work on already. Another way to do it would be to look at the kinds of work that students are expected to do in college, right? In a first-year credit-bearing course. What are those courses demand? And then take a look at the kind of work that students are asked to do, at least at in their high school classes, right? How close is the work that students are asked to do in high school? To what extent does that reflect the prerequisite skills that are necessary for success in the first year credit bearing courses that they take? It's not a simple task to do, but neither is it impossible. And it may be worth the effort to try to figure out how to build those kinds of indicators.
The latter half of that question about, what is expected in the skills to be able to successfully complete the college courses is part of this study that AIR is doing. It's contracted by MSDE, connecting that to what is currently expected in high school classes. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Rachel might be able to say more about what she knows about the process of connecting the CCR results with the CCR study results from AIR with practice. But I have to apologize. I'm going to step out right now and I'm going to hand the baton over to Rachel, Emma, and Joe. Thank you all. And I see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Laura. Rachel, did you want to say something?
I was just thinking about what Laura was asking me. I do think we need to identify measures that we can track to measure once the college and career ready standard is determined, and that the work, it's going to be a combination of work done at MSDE to align the state standards and the state model curriculum with whatever the new CCR, if there is any changes to be made, both all the way back to pre-K, so that the entire instructional system is aligned, so that students have the opportunity to stay on track for college and career readiness all through primary and secondary, and then measures to track that the LEAs have then incorporated all of those standards into their local curriculum, and then that teachers have incorporated them into their lesson plans and syllabi. So, I don't know what that looks like, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I think the AIR work, I'm sorry, not the AIR work, the RAND work provides some good starting points for that. There are a couple of other organizations that have been doing things that relate to this, but it will take an effort to pull it together. It won't happen overnight, but it's worth the effort, I think.
So if we were, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to say, I'm aware of the RAND study, and I'm not sure that we have a copy of it yet, although we may, but I was wondering if somebody has it and they could drop it in the chat for everyone, that would be great.
I have it if I can. I've never dropped something in a chat, so whether I can pull that off or not remains to be seen.
Or email it later, and
I could at least email it.
Yeah. And that would be fine, and then we can make sure we get it to everyone. Yeah,
I have it. I can also forward it to you. So
okay,
great, thank you. So it sounds like, looking at this language directly, of percentage of schools and districts offering this instructional system fully aligned to the CCR standard, that is a popular standard based off, or measure based off of the votes that we have here. and based off this conversation, it might be worth re-examining this to make it even more specific to the percentage of schools that offer a coherent, aligned instructional system, and then having maybe even sub-measures that are indicators of whether this is being met. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Mike?
Yes, I think I'd be inclined to talk about the number of districts that have a coherent instructional program more so than individual schools, partly because it's more manageable, partly because I think the district has to assume responsibility, right, for the coherence of the program in the district. And it's still a big task to gather the data and figure this out.
Okay, well, we can continue to look at that and think about indicators of that based off the studies that you mentioned and what that could look like. Bringing that up. Okay, I think that Laura, did she also, do we mind moving on to another measure? Or did we have any other comments or suggestions, questions on this one? Okay.
I actually have one other thought in this space that goes back to the draft logic map in the purple section. It does begin to get at what are the components of a coherent instructional system. There's something missing from that I think needs to be incorporated. And that has to do with the extent to which professional learning activities for teachers are actually focused on the use of the instructional materials that they use as opposed to generic instructional strategies. There's a lot of research on that now that is suggesting the more teachers get professional development, the more they work together professionally to figure out how to implement a curriculum that they're delivering, the better the results that you get. I imagine that because there's a separate pillar that deals with basically professional development kind of issues, that's, I suspect, one of the reasons why that's not reflected in this one. And that's understandable, but somehow it's important to send a message out to the field that you can't have a coherent instructional program if your professional development program isn't part of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you're exactly right. That is why it's not in pillar 3, because it's in pillar 2. But I do think it's really important to make that connection. Yeah, either maybe in pillar 2.
Good. Yeah, I don't know that it matters where it goes as long as you get the curriculum and the professional learning activities together.
Right.
So some of the other measures, a couple of those do touch on the use of high quality instructional materials. For the remaining ones that we have not yet discussed, we have teacher use of high quality instructional materials. We had 5 votes for that, including 1 first place vote. We also had some votes for number of college credits available through dual enrollment. And then let's see, other things that we haven't talked about yet. Why don't we pause there and actually talk through those things first, and then we can and how about number of industry credentials offered? We had 7 votes for that as well. So teacher use of high quality instructional materials, number of industry credentials offered, number of college credits available through dual enrollment. I think those were the next biggest ones.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate something I said last week in terms of the teachers' pedagogical approaches is probably more important than the material that they're using. You can have teachers that are using the same material and get drastically different outcomes. So I hope we try to figure out how to incorporate that into this rating, if feasible.
Would that partly be answered if we had professional development systems, speaking to what Mike was just saying, that focus on the use of the materials, the actual materials that are part of the curriculum versus generic strategies, so including a measure that focuses on how those materials are used? Do you think, Dr. Tolson and Mike?
Yeah, I think so.
Speak to that.
Yeah, and then, you know, different things like project-based learning, and some of the approaches to teaching that has demonstrated effectiveness. I think, you know, if there's training that's associated with that, or the number of teachers that endorse using those approaches.
Okay, Shamoya, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I know the blueprint speaks to culturally relevant pedagogy. I'm wondering if there's some application to this conversation here.
Are you thinking, sorry, Shamoya, you got cut off a little bit there, I think maybe. Are you thinking of an additional outcome measure that would measure use of culturally responsive pedagogy?
No, and my connection is terrible. I'm wondering what the blueprint says in regards to culturally relevant pedagogy and whether that's relevant to this part of the conversation.
So that is something that students, or that will be part of the professional development system. Specifically, I think that principals need to be trained in culturally responsive pedagogy and able to provide professional development on that. Rachel, do I have that right?
Well, that, and also that that teachers have training on culturally responsive pedagogy, and all of that it kind of lives in pillar 2. Although I'm not sure that we have outcome measures that really are tied to any of those things right now. And so some of this conversation is making me think about, like, how do we make these connections more clear across the pillars? Because it's all the blueprint. So at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter which pillar it's in. You know, Jackie had spoken earlier about elevating some additional measures to the blueprint level. And while I don't think it should only be or exclusively be elements that cross over multiple pillars, but I think where we identify sort of concepts that are really critical to the success of the blueprint, I think that and I feel like this definitely would qualify of this whole last conversation. So maybe something we can think about more as we're thinking about the blueprint level.
And the professional development and indicators of aligned professional development, particular curriculum and PD.
Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe even on the logic maps being more detailed about what connections within the other pillars are there, not just to pillar 2 pieces of it that we can indicate.
I just looked at the time, and I realized that we are at time. And so we're just going to go slightly over here just to wrap things up, to note that we have a couple of output measures that we did not get to. And obviously we did not get to the outcome measures, which we should not be surprised, because this is such a huge pillar, and we still had to wrap up the pillar 2 conversation. So we will be talking about the pillar 3 outcome measures in the next meeting. And I want to just quickly note that I made an error in copying and pasting some of the information over in the Google form for pillar 3. So I really apologize on that. And if you would like to change some of your answers or email me, I'll just quickly tell you. And Angie, thank you for pointing this out to me earlier. Or no, I think Ann did. Ann or Angie. I'm sorry, I'm not sure who sent me the email. But the special education enrollment rate, or percentage of students assigned to special education, which is this one right here, and then the percentage of students who have completed a post-CCR pathway. Those were not included as options in outcome measures 2 through 5, but they were included as options in outcome measure 1. So if you want to include those among your 5 for outcome measures 2 through 5 and did not get a chance to select that in the drop down option, please let me know, email me. You can chat me right now if you'd like to, and I will make sure that that's added in. So I do apologize about that, but just wanted to note that for everyone. So if you did not get a chance to list one of those in outcome measures 2 through 5, just shoot me an email and I will change that. But otherwise, we are meeting again on June 20th from 3 to 5 p.m. And we will be discussing as much of Pillar 4 and 5 as possible at our next meeting. We might have to just condense it down to Pillar 4 and finishing up Pillar 3, just based off of how today's conversation went. But I will be sending out the Google Forms like I did last week again with the Pillar 4 measures at the very least for everyone to vote on. So we can continue this on. And then the work group, just as a reminder, will continue to meet post July. So if you have any questions about that or have concerns about your participation, please feel free to reach out individually to let us know. But I just want to pause here and see if anybody has any questions.
Emma, as of right now, do we have a meeting beyond June 20th on the calendar?
We don't. So that's a very good point. We're gonna have to start putting those on the calendar soon. And we'll be navigating that since everyone will have some, I'm sure, very busy summer schedules. So
Particularly because we need to make sure we get through all 5 of the pillars and the blueprint level.
Yeah.
So that can all be shared with the AIB. Yeah. In July.
Yeah, so we will be reaching out about availability for a July meeting as well. Okay, if there are no other questions, I'm seeing a couple of people adding things in the chat about selections for outcome measures for Pillar 3. I appreciate that. Thank you. So if there are any other questions, please feel free to stick around or to email us. But thank you all again.